Hey, it's State of State. We got your Nittany Lion update. It's a football discussion with Tom and Justin, so kick back and press play.
With former Penn State and NFL defensive back Justin King, I'm Tom Hannafin. This is State of State. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. This podcast is presented by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting. From Major League Baseball to UFC to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to betonline.ag today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. Penn State fans, are you feeling confident that the Nittany Lions can win college football's national championship next season? Lock in your futures bet at betonline.ag today. State of State is presented by BetOnline. The game starts here. State of State is a proud supporter of Blue White Outfitters. Blue White Outfitters was created as a retail shop meant to highlight the confidence, competitiveness, and fearlessness of the elite athletes found throughout the history of Penn State University. Check out their Lockdown U and Lawn Boys merchandise today. All sales from Blue White Outfitters directly benefit Penn State student athletes. Also, official State of State merchandise is available now. Support the show and grab State of State t-shirts, hoodies, hats, and more. Visit www.bluewhiteoutfitters.com today. Hi, everyone, and welcome to State of State. I'm Tom Hannafin. We are welcoming back to the show the great Joe DeLeone, who without him, this show would not exist. Once upon a time, our producer, friend within the Believe Podcast Network, and part of the fantastic Ruffino and Joe show, which is wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, etc. You guys do an incredible job, so I'm always privileged whenever you take the time to come back onto the show, Joe. I really appreciate it. Today, I wanted to talk with you about the opposing quarterbacks on Penn State's schedule, because I think 2025, the expectations are certainly high, and the kind of macro perspective always against Penn State is it's a two-game schedule. And I'll hear that, and I don't know how you feel about what Penn State has to deal with this upcoming season, you know, home against Oregon in a true whiteout finally, and then at Ohio State November 1st. So outside of that, Penn State should win all their other games. I don't know what you feel, you know, at first blush looking at their schedule.
Well, I think that the one outside of Ohio State and Oregon being the, you know, those two clear most important games, I do think that there is a challenge that comes with this Indiana matchup. And I think that it's natural for us to see what Indiana did last year and to think, was this just a one-hit wonder? Was this kind of like a TCU situation with Sonny Dykes in year one, where he catches fire and then it's been a bit of a slow feeling out period? I'm very high on Fernando Mendoza, which I'm sure that we're going to dig into talking about a little bit more. But the rest of that roster is super underrated. Roman Hemby, who comes over from Maryland, is a very dynamic running back. Elijah Surratt is a quality receiver who's regarded in the upcoming draft. D'Angelo Pons is a good defensive back for them. And Michael Kamara was one of the most productive edge rushers. So that is probably the biggest third game that I would acknowledge. But I agree with you that this is really prime positioning, very similar to what Ohio State had last year, bring back all these veteran guys with a very winnable schedule to go 11-1, to win the Big Ten potentially, and to do damage in the college football playoff.
See if Penn State can get back there. First and foremost, a lot has to happen. So I want to kind of go through the schedule, you know, in chronological order. No disrespect to Nevada, FIU, and Villanova. We're going to skip those. We're going to go straight to Oregon on September 27th. Dante Moore, he, like a handful of quarterbacks in the Big Ten, it's promise and potential, but there just isn't that raw data to really back up how you feel about the guy. And I can understand Dante Moore, his first season, getting a good amount of playing time at UCLA, a down UCLA team, transfers. He's behind Dylan Gabriel last year at Oregon, so he stayed within the system, but this is going to be his first year really owning the system, driving the car. You lose Evan Stewart, and on top of this, as I was just mentioning, this is going to be the first whiteout game against Penn State's actual biggest home opponent since 2019, 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC. It should be a spectacle. So you take all of that and you march Dante Moore, first year starting officially for this program, into literally the Lions' den, into maybe the hardest place to play in college football. So one, how do you feel about Dante Moore? And two, how do you feel about that challenge he's going to have to face?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a huge challenge, and not having really like a ton of playing experience. You mentioned that he played as a freshman at UCLA. That is going to be like the true determining situation to prove who he is he going to be as the Oregon Ducks quarterback for the next couple of seasons. Does he live up to the expectations? I think that, and he's even spoken on this, Dante Moore has spoken on the chance to sit behind Dylan Gabriel. I think that was the best possible thing for him, having seen what he did at UCLA. There were a lot of positives. There was a lot to get really excited about, where you watch like, man, this kid is special. He's got really good touch. He's got a cannon of an arm. He can be a really big-time playmaker. I think he's got better tools than what Bo Nix had and what Dylan Gabriel had. He just doesn't have that cerebral understanding, the feel for the game, the way that those guys did, because they were veterans and they had played so much at their previous destinations that helped them in Will Stein's offense. So him getting to sit gives him a benefit of progression and improvement, of redshirting to just learn and absorb. And he, again, has mentioned how Dylan Gabriel and sitting behind him has allowed for him to learn as much as possible without taking live bullets. There is still a lot for him to prove, but I've got a lot of high hopes for him that he could be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big Ten. I do think, though, that this Penn State game is going to be very eye-opening, and I think that it's going to be too tough of a challenge. And at this current moment, I do think that Penn State is going to overwhelm him enough that they will win that ball game.
What do you think about the weapons that Moore has in comparison to what Gabriel had last year and what Bo Nix had before him?
Yeah, I think it's very similar because, we're just talking about the departure of Tez Johnson and Terrence Ferguson for the most part. And I think that, the run game is going to be fine with Mekhi Hughes coming in. Isaiah World could end up being a huge upgrade on their offensive line, which is insane to say after they had Josh Connerly go in the first round. Isaiah World could maybe even go earlier than that. But I'm really high on DeCorian Moore, who's the true freshman coming in. And it sounds like from some like Oregon podcasts that I've listened to, they have high hopes for him. Like they think that he could be an immediate high impact true freshman. Not Jeremiah Smith good, but maybe he has a Ryan Williams type of a year. And he's got that overall just makeup of what you look for in a dynamic athlete and a super committed kid that could take off right off the bat. So Evan Stewart goes down. This might launch DeCorian Moore into a position to become a freshman phenom and capture the attention of so many people across America.
So Penn State hosts Oregon on September 27th. The following week, October 4th, they go cross country, which is something a lot of Big Ten teams are just still getting used to after the realignment of the Big Ten. And you add in some pieces from the Pac-12 and Washington, Oregon, UCLA, and USC. So after they play Oregon at home, they'll travel to Los Angeles to play UCLA. And I think this is, a couple of months ago, this game was just kind of like, yeah, Penn State should win this game. They handled UCLA at home last year, different cast of characters. It's very different because now it's Nico Iamaleava as a starting quarterback. One, what did you think about all the drama surrounding Nico? And two, what is this team actually going to look like with Nico playing quarterback?
Well, to jump right into that second question, like I think that there's just so much uncertainty still. I have no idea what really to expect because I don't really know how he fits into this offense. We have no understanding or expectation, which, is good and bad for this UCLA team because he could catch a lot of their opponents off guard. But at the same time, is him joining the team after the spring enough time for them to get acclimated, for him to hit the ground running, to have a better year than what he did in his first year as a starter at Tennessee. the whole drama that happened, we talked about it a lot on Ruffino and Joe. It was one of our most watched videos. I had my work at A to Z Sports. I had the benefit, my co-host Ryan Roberts, he was able to get a lot of really good information and was one of the leading people that reported on the situation to kind of uncover the craziness that was happening with his father, with his representation. The whole thing is concerning to me because it just seems like that there's a lot of distractions, and the vibe that you got from seeing Nico's demeanor and the inconsistency in the way that he played, it kind of makes me wonder, is there negative influence over his shoulder that is distracting him to the point where it is affecting his play on the field? I don't think he has the same beliefs as his father and what his representation wanted of him. It sounded like they were being super difficult, and he seems like a relatively shy kid that was going through the ringer. I say all that to say, for his play on the field, I thought that this upcoming year for him in Tennessee's offense, he could take a leap forward. The continuity was important for him. He had a lot of up and down play. He seemed really timid at times. Like, he needed to be more aggressive, has the arm and the athleticism to be aggressive, but there was so much hesitation in an offense that really helped quarterbacks flourish. He could have had a huge jump like Hendon Hooker did in his second year as a starter, but now that he's changing locations completely again with all these distractions, I'm just fearful that this is going to be a very rocky year for him. I've seen some people also even throw his name in the ring for the 2026 draft for the quarterback rankings. I think that's way too soon because he needs to get settled and he needs to actually prove himself before he declares, and probably will be a couple of seasons.
There's some positivity surrounding his new offensive coordinator, Tino Sunseri, former starting quarterback at Pitt once upon a time. And Deshaun Foster looks like he's putting together a good culture, at least at UCLA. However, kind of the points you were just saying, it felt very much like a pro-style offense last year, and part of that was limitations of Ethan Garbers, who played well, I guess you could say, for a veteran quarterback. And then from what I got to see of Justin Martin, I thought he was a decent comp to Nico, and Martin in his handful of opportunities looked promising. I think what he'll do at Maryland this year is going to be interesting. But Nico, it to a degree feels like a square peg in a round hole. And then also the drama surrounding him, Joe, it feels like it's been forgotten a little bit. It'll ramp back up during the season. But Los Angeles isn't really a football market where it's going to be driven into the ground every single week.
No, and I think that is probably like the one benefit, is that they're also not even the biggest show for college football in Los Angeles. I lived in Los Angeles for 3 years, and it was almost shocking to me how it felt like very few people even cared about USC and UCLA. There were pockets of it. There were certainly people that you would meet that were very excited about it, but it's not like other parts of the country where there is a very aggressive commitment to the local team. Or if you live where I live now, near New York City, anybody you talk to loves their alma mater wherever they played. But to that point, UCLA is not going to really be in that same microscope. Will he be highly talked about for the first couple of weeks? Yes, absolutely. But as their schedule kind of rolls on, I think that he'll easily be forgotten, which sounds super negative, but that might be for the better, that he gets to calm himself down after all the craziness that happened back in April.
So looking ahead at Penn State's schedule, again, no disrespect to the Northwestern Wildcats, but at Penn State on October 11th, really no matter who Northwestern is putting out there at quarterback, I still feel pretty strongly Penn State's going to have that game. The next real biggest challenge on their schedule, October 18th, it's two words that scare the hell out of me for my time being a fan and covering Penn State football, is at Kinnick. Penn State going to Iowa. And Mark Gronowski is another one of these quarterbacks within the Big Ten where it's like, okay, there's potential, there's promise, but we have no idea how this is going to work out. He's coming off of injury, transferring up from FCS to FBS from South Dakota State University, where he was extremely productive. Put up every stat possibly imaginable, record-breaking, multiple national championships. Like it all looks good on paper, but then you're like, is this actually going to work? How do you feel about Gronowski?
I've had a lot of exposure to Mark Gronowski. I actually got to see him in person a couple of times at South Dakota State, some of their games, and I've traveled all the way to see him play. He's a very gifted player. He was recognized in one of his years as the Heisman of the FCS national champion. It's for a very good reason. He's a gifted athlete. He's an impactful passer. He's not going to be the most challenging quarterback that they see, but he's extremely experienced. If the play calling's there and they know how to capitalize on his tools, he could be the most talented quarterback that they've had at Iowa in some time. I think that like the biggest thing I'm trying to hammer home with Iowa for college football fans and Big Ten fans for this upcoming year, do not discount him. Don't. That would be a significant mistake. And don't just think, oh, he's coming from South Dakota State. Who cares? He's coming from the FCS. That would be a huge mistake for any Big Ten football fan that is going to square off with him. He will make plays with his legs. He will make a big throw in an unexpected late game situation to turn the tide of a football game. He has been battle tested to the highest degree and has also faced FBS opponents in his time at South Dakota State after all the million games, million snaps that he's played in his career. Older guy that I would certainly trust that could shock somebody. Don't know if it's going to be Penn State, but I think that it's plausible for it to happen.
Does Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa staff know what to do with a mobile quarterback? Like, had mobility at the position last year, but they didn't have the ability necessarily.
That's the greatest question about all this. Like, does he get pigeonholed, and do they just try to? He's certainly a better
hand it off, kid.
Right. He's certainly a better athlete than Cade McNamara, and he's a bigger, stronger kid. But I hope that they don't dig themselves into their old ways of thinking that, like, hey, we're just going to run the football, and whoever the next Iowa running back is up with Caleb Johnson on, that they're going to be fine. They need to utilize his expertise and his experience to their benefit, because that's going to be how they win football games. If this Iowa team disappoints, it's going to be because they suck at figuring out a way to use him to that point.
So Penn State at Iowa on October 18th. They then get a bye, and it's another road game, November 1st, as I mentioned, Penn State at Ohio State. So having that bye gives you some comfort, gives you a little bit of time to get things organized. And depending on how that Oregon game went earlier on in the season, this is either not necessarily a must win, but like if you have hopes of the Big Ten championship game, you have to win this game if you lose to Oregon earlier on, or if you beat Oregon back in September, then man, you're trying to steamroll your way potentially and get over the hump against arguably the biggest rival Penn State can imagine on its schedule. The big outlier with this is Julian Sayin, who I would put right in that same bucket as Dante Moore, and even less experience because he transferred straight from Alabama, didn't have that experience of being the starter briefly like Dante Moore did at UCLA, just went to Alabama and then very quickly was out, sat behind Will Howard last year, saw this team win a national championship last year. New offensive coordinator. The big thing, you have the big red easy button in number 4, and Jeremiah Smith standing right there. Carnell Tate. You and I are both very high, by the way, on Max Clare, tight end transfer from Purdue. So it's like the weapons are there, but what the hell is Julian Sayin going to be?
Right, and I think that's going to be one of the biggest questions in college football this upcoming year is, does he live up to the hope that everyone's had? You kind of hear the murmurs when he first got to Ohio State after he abruptly left Alabama and he ended up with the Buckeyes. You kind of hear these thoughts that, like, hey, maybe he could contribute as a freshman. That doesn't end up happening. Will Howard goes on to win a national championship. The rest is history. And then you hear every other murmur that, like, man, he's looking great, but he hasn't truly declared himself as the starter over Lincoln Kienholz, who Ryan Day has not stated who is the expected starter. It's probably going to be Julian Sayin because of the high hopes of what he can bring to the table. I think that what you get out of him, having tracked him as a recruit and watching his high school tape, he's a great distributor. And in an offense that has Carnell Tate and the best receiver in the country, maybe the best player in the country in Jeremiah Smith, all you got to do is just launch the ball in any general direction of either of those guys. I think they're both very reliable, especially Jeremiah Smith. He couldn't be given a better situation for a first-time starter at Ohio State than what he has right now to be able to turn to and rely on Jeremiah Smith. And then you just mentioned there, like, I love Max Clare. I think that Max Clare is going to be the first tight end drafted in this upcoming draft. I think that the hype should start to build for him. So if Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith are neutralized, Clare could end up still being a reliable dump-off option for him if he needs to. So whatever Julian Sayin does, he has some of the best targets in the country out of any starting quarterback.
What do you expect out of the supporting running game for potentially Sayin or Kineholz, to your point? I wasn't terribly impressed with Kineholz a few years ago in the bowl game, and that was, bowl games are so tough to gauge at this point, but he didn't necessarily inspire confidence, but I digress. The running back room is very different. Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, both gone. I like C.J. Donaldson, the transfer from West Virginia. I like Sam Williams-Dixon, I believe is his last name, if I'm putting all the names together correctly. It's like 3 last names all bunched together. But I like those guys, but I just don't know enough about them in this system if they're going to be able to support a Julian Sayin at starting quarterback.
Right. I think that just the expectation, and a lot of Ohio State fans should be believing this, is that there's going to be a drop off. You just had 2 guys get drafted super early that were athletic freaks. One was dominant in the SEC. The other was dominant throughout his career at Ohio State. There's going to be a drop off. James Peoples also expected to be a key player in the mix. I don't almost want to seem like it's a cop out, and you kind of led into it. I almost don't even really know what to expect from this Ohio State run game, especially for the fact that Brian Hartline is going to be calling plays. Is there going to be more of a commitment to throwing the football? Are they going to be able to throw the football as much as they would hope to if he's the one who's the true decision maker as the play caller? I would just think that with the fact that they lost 2 starting running backs and they're almost starting fresh to this point, that there should be an expectation that the run game is not going to be the primary focus, like what it was with Chip Kelly orchestrating things.
Very curious to see what Hartline is like as the offensive coordinator. That's another really big element to this Ohio State team in 2025. So after Penn State plays Ohio State on the road, the following week they come home to Beaver Stadium and they will host Indiana. So again, kind of like the Oregon game, say Ohio State is the first loss on Penn State's schedule. Now you're trying to rebound against a team that did make the college football playoff, a hot button issue, polarizing team last year. But Curt Cignetti now has a new signal caller in Fernando Mendoza from Cal. And I've spoken to Rhett Lewis of the Big Ten and NFL Network, former Indiana wide receiver. And the feeling for him and a lot of Indiana fans and people who cover the team is that Mendoza's potentially has a higher ceiling than Curtis Rourke, which I think says a lot considering what Rourke was able to do last year. And Mendoza has multiple years of eligibility. So this is maybe not just a 2025 problem for Penn State. This is going to be years to come for the rest of the conference. What do you think about Mendoza? And do you think Cignetti and company are more than a one-hit wonder?
I'm extremely high on Mendoza. And I think that for them to not be a one-hit wonder, to pull out the most gifted, in my eyes, quarterback in the portal, that is going to help them not become that one-hit wonder. And for me right now, 2026 draft, he is my number 1 quarterback. The arm talent that he has is phenomenal. He can rip it. He's a very underrated athlete, big, strong kid. And surprising sometimes when we have these guys with these big arms, you don't really know if you can expect them to have good touch and timing. And he flashes a lot of brilliance in his throws and the plays that he was able to make, not really throwing to anybody at Cal that was going to, make a significant impact. I think stepping in with Mike Shanahan calling the plays again this upcoming year, knowing that Curtis Rourke was able to be as productive as he was coming from Ohio, I think that Mendoza is going to have an amazing season. And I think more importantly, we saw Indiana get kind of held back by the fact that their RPO heavy system was challenged so aggressively by the top opponents that they saw. It was very easy to stop going up against teams that had talented secondaries. I think that with another year with Surratt coming back and Mendoza, who has the physical tools to be a first-round pick compared to Curtis Rourke, who is a late-round pick, I really think that he could be much more dynamic and challenging to the opponents that they see. So everyone should be all in on Mendoza. I think that at the very least, he's going to be one of the better quarterbacks in the Big Ten and will cause headaches and keep them in any ball game.
So that's November 8th, Penn State at home against Indiana. I didn't necessarily include this quarterback when you and I were first talking about this episode, but I feel like I kind of have to now that I'm looking at it. Saturday, November 15th, Penn State at Michigan State. What is Aiden Childs? There's all this potential, but what is he?
I know some people that I've talked to in that also break down film and kind of look ahead to the draft that are high on him. He's a great athlete. He was in a blender of a situation last year at Michigan State. And
Like,
anyone who
wow.
watched Michigan State games watched him and was like, man, he can move. And then you just see him getting smoked because he's not really getting guys blocking for him. He doesn't really have a lot of receivers to throw to. They didn't have much of a run game. He was the only real bright spot. I think knowing physically what he brings to the table, and in year 2 of Jonathan Smith, this is one of the few guys in the Big Ten and in the country that could just take an abrupt, out of nowhere, huge leap. Like we could be sitting and saying, like, where did Aiden Childs come from? Or he could just kind of remain where he's at, which is great athlete, but not really living up to the expectation and turning the ball over a ton like he did last year and taking a lot of bad sacks. It kind of all depends on, does the supporting cast around him play better? They're going to need to give him a lot more support if he wants to take that step forward.
Just some head-scratching decisions by Childs last year. But again, just so young, supporting cast, a lot of factors go into it. The last quarterback that I wanted to mention, and no disrespect to the great Ethan Kaliakmanis of Rutgers at Penn State, will close out the season against on the road on November 29th. Penn State's Senior Day game at Beaver Stadium, Saturday, November 22nd. Penn State hosting Nebraska. And I am so curious to see what happens with Dylan Raiola in 2025. There's a lot of the people making jokes about him, the Patrick Mahomes lookalike, that sort of thing. Last year was just rough for him, and that the offensive line, the running game was not there to support him. Tough supporting cast in terms of wide receivers. It felt like before Dana Holgorsen was installed as the offensive coordinator, they were asking him to throw the ball and be a hero as a true freshman, and that's just the kiss of death. Do you think they've done enough in the transfer portal with the offensive line and the running game to help him out this year? And what do you think about the pairing of him and Holgorsen with a full offseason to work?
I think that the full offseason is definitely going to help. It was just such a very awkward timing of bringing him in midseason. And he's a great play caller. He's a great offensive mind that I think there can be success there. I also like them bringing in Dane Key, who could be a productive receiver, and they did bolster their offensive line, which did need quite a bit of work. I think at the end of the day that Dylan Raiola falls into the very rare bucket that we have with young quarterbacks, that even if the roster around him isn't great, that he is a program elevator. He ultimately, when he moves on to the NFL, will be a franchise elevator. He was, and I remember watching some of his early tape and breaking it down after he had some of those big games. I was blown away. There's just some of the most hard to find natural instincts for a quarterback that he brings to the table. I think that it's easy to make fun of him for trying to mimic Patrick Mahomes, but the kid plays like him, and he plays much further along in his development than Patrick Mahomes was when he declared for the NFL draft. The arm, the improvisational skills, and that overall just natural playmaking ability, it will keep Nebraska in any football game. They just needed to elevate the roster around him. I really think that this past offseason has been an elevation. They're going to be better. This would be I would stand by that. I think that Nebraska is going to be a trap game for any team. If they were a dark horse to reach the playoff, I wouldn't be surprised. And they've been kind of a team that I've been touting to go 9-3 this upcoming year and truly surprise a lot of people.
That back half of Penn State's schedule, you use the word trap game, and I'm thinking, okay, you're at Iowa, you get a bye, then you play at Ohio State, you host Indiana, and then the aforementioned road game against Michigan State. So you could look at that and be like, oh, okay, is that a trap game? It's like, no, for me, it's Nebraska at home on Senior Day, because maybe you take Michigan State and Rutgers for granted a little bit, and those are winnable games, don't get me wrong, but Nebraska jammed right in there. It's not the same threat level as I would say for Oregon and Ohio State, but you can't take it lightly. And if that's a situation where potential worst case scenario, you've maybe dropped the two games that matter, Oregon and Ohio State, and it's like, well, you really can't afford this one. If you were to drop this, then maybe you're on the outside looking in of the college football playoff. So there's just a lot of scenarios that could play out for Penn State. And I think the word trap game, the phrase trap game, makes too much sense for this one. Overall, looking at Penn State's schedule, do you expect a college football playoff appearance? Do you expect a Big Ten title appearance? Like, I don't want to go much further beyond that, because everybody and their brother's like, it better be the national title or bust. So.
Well, I the expectation for that to happen is completely understandable because of what they did this offseason and the favorable schedule that they have. They have exactly, and I've been saying this the whole offseason. I'm going to keep saying it. They followed the blueprint of what Michigan did and what Ohio State did. They had key veteran players that they enticed to return, especially the running back duo of Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. They've got a good offensive line. I think that Drew Shelton's one of the most underrated offensive linemen in the country. Their defense has a ton of talent. Zakee Wheatley and Denai Dennis Sutton and Zane Durant are going to be super disruptive this upcoming year on defense. They have one of the most well-rounded, talented rosters in the country. It's been well recruited. These aren't just scrappy guys that have developed. No, they've been highly recruited. They've developed. They've gotten this far. Them getting to the college football playoff and winning the Big Ten, maybe not winning the Big Ten, but getting to the playoff should be the expectation. Returning to the Big Ten title game should be the expectation. It all just comes down to, does James Franklin finally get over the hump of getting his teams locked in late game situations? The Notre Dame game in the Orange Bowl was the firmest example of that, where they had their chance. They had every opportunity, but the game slipped away for whatever reason, that there was just being a little bit more out-willed. They have every opportunity. A lot of it falls on James Franklin. A lot of it falls on Drew Aller for him to be a better decision maker and for him to be more decisive and more consistent as a quarterback. If all those things come in line, this should be a national championship winning team, but there's just a lot of question marks that need to be proven, and that could be proven within the first month of the season.
Just need all that to happen. Just need all that.
It's a lot to ask for, but I mean, they're a million steps ahead of many other teams in college football right now.
Yeah, a lot of wait and see on this. This podcast platform has existed for 4 years. This will be our 5th season covering Penn State football, over 350 episodes, well over 1 million views, downloads, and a lot of that is thanks to Joe DeLeone. So, Joe, I always appreciate you coming back onto the show. Check out Ruffino and Joe, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. You guys do an awesome job. One of my favorite listens in all of the college football podcasting world. So, Joe, thank you very much, and enjoy the upcoming season.
Of course. Thank you so much, Tom. And I'm sure we're going to connect soon, and hopefully Penn State can put it all together.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This episode and our entire library of shows is available now on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. Please like, comment, subscribe, rate us, and turn on notifications. Follow us on social media at State of State Pod. Comment on our YouTube channel. And if you haven't done so already, you can become a member of our YouTube channel. For just 99 cents a month, you can get all upcoming episodes of State of State, plus our entire members-only playlist, ad-free, commercial-free. Hit the join button on our homepage or follow the link in the description of this podcast. State of State is presented by Bet Online and by Blue White Outfitters.